I think America it's a center right country politically, and I think we're reverting to the mean. I mean, the American creed, as identified by the great sociologist Daniel Bell, it's liberty, it's laissez-faire, it's individualism, it's egalitarianism, meaning equality of opportunity, not equality of outcome, free speech. I mean, these are the core American values. We drifted. We
Yeah.
were in a woke reign of terror for the last 12 years.
Yeah.
It sort of starts around Occupy, starts around Black Lives Matter. The trance is really only broken by the election of Donald Trump in 2024. I think that we're also coming out of the neoliberal era, you might call it, the 30 years since the fall of the Berlin Wall, since the end of communism. That was a period where there was a lot of apocalyptic talk about climate change. I do think that that's going away. We saw it as a period of heightened anxiety around social media and around censorship. I think that's going away. I think new fears will emerge. AI would be at the top of my list of things that I could see people becoming alarmist about. And I think there's some concerns there, but I also
Yeah.
think it'll be the vehicle for alarmism. We were all this alarmism about overpopulation. Now we have a genuine concern about underpopulation, about the need to reproduce, about, how are we going to integrate all of these migrants who have come in. So I do think I see a pretty sharp break, actually, which is not often common in history, but you can see, I think, an end of an era in, say, I don't know, 1989, 1990 to 2024. I think it's an end of an era. It's the end of it. It's the beginning of a new one. Probably see some changes to our alliances, in Asia, in Europe. We sort of see a renewed nationalism, which I think is very healthy. I think a reappreciation of masculinity. And we saw with
Yeah.
Zuckerberg where you would think, well, what does masculinity have to do with free speech? It does have something to do with it. It has to do with this idea that that it is possible to be oversensitive, that there is a way to be,
Yeah.
there's been so much emphasis in the culture on empathy, and certainly that has a place, but it can go too far, and you can be pathological, or we say pathological altruism or suicidal empathy, even where we're harming ourselves with this excess empathy. Obviously, there's a golden mean here. I mean, you can be completely callous and psychopathic. You can also be such a bleeding heart that you'll sacrifice your own needs or sacrifice vulnerable people in the name of being compassionate towards predators. We obviously need to get back to some more of a Aristotelian mean between these extremes. I think that rebalancing is happening. I think it's all the good. It's the thing that gives me the most hope, because when you look at, civilization's rise and fall, and you ask, is that happening in the United States? And you kind of go, maybe. There's certainly some signs of it. On the other hand,
Especially on the budget front.
oh, for sure, there's a bunch of big problems, right? Or how about the schools don't teach kids anything
No,
anymore?
trash.
So on the other hand, you look around the world and you go, who are we competing with here? China and Europe? Who wants to do
Right.
business in China and Europe? Here we're still
They're arresting people for tweets while their girls get raped by gangs in the UK.
right.
So we're like the last man standing.
We're looking good. I mean, San Francisco, as messed up as it is, it's still the epicenter of AI and of technology. Here we are in Austin. It's now the media capital in many ways. I mean, the last election was really a podcasting and social media election. You could see a guy can run for. I mean, Trump had this challenge, which was he needed to appear less scary to moderates, and so they put him on podcasts for many, many hours. That's potentially game changing when you start to get candidates that can run for higher office, where you don't have to spend tens of millions of dollars on cheap television ads that make you dumber. Instead, you can go and be on podcasts for hours at a time, and it's not the same. There's always this thing with politics, which was that. How do you make sure you're not taken out of context? How do you make sure that people really get your views? Well, here we are in this podcasting moment, and it's a beautiful thing. So if you can protect free speech in your society, as I think we've been able to, a lot of other stuff can course correct based on that feedback.
It's funny because you're connecting the dots between free speech and masculinity, and to bring it all the way back to the start of the conversation, I remember reading about studies of hazing and firefighters in particular, and that one of the things that is so interesting about this, and I think it might have even been in the book Influence. I think it's Robert Cialdini. I might be misremembering that.
Yeah.
But that basically, when you need to have a high trust team, it turns out that shared pain actually brings people together in a really potent way. And that the thing that from the outside that looks like barbaric and exclusionary, like, using all the worst language with each other and using racial epithets and being jerks. And hazing is one of the mechanisms that have just naturally emerged to basically go through that together, to say, okay, we know that you went through the Rubicon that we all went through. And now when the chips are down and we're in that burning building, I know you've got my back. And it emerges in a lot of environments, but it's one of these things that is part of like the feminized, hypersensitive era of no, that's bullying. No, you have to say bully back down if someone says something mean to you. Speech is violence. That it's all like tugging at things that are so deeply human and actually have utility that we only barely understand for how we get along. Like, actually, it turns out cursing each other out is way less important and way less painful than dying in a firefight because you are hesitant because you don't trust each other. It's way better to not have any hesitation when the chips are down because you trust each other, because you did this super low cost, low risk hazing process. And it's almost like hazing is like the social equivalent of clearing the brush. Small fires actually prevent the larger fires, even in our social lives.
I think that's the right way to look at it. I mean, I just think we need to get back to this re-embrace of adversity. I also think we got to, re-embrace the role of masculinity in the society. I mean, we know from the evolutionary psychologists that for, women, that they're very interested in leveling and keeping each other on kind of the same level. They don't want anybody to get too high status. They don't want to get too low status. And they will ostracise as a way to reject people that try to get too big or too small. Men are different. Men are much more focused on the ability hierarchy, on performance, but they won't ostracize as much. They might downrank or put you in a different place on that hierarchy or meritocracy, but they want to keep you around in that sense, because you're going to, we're going to understand there's going to be some different roles that you might play without being ostracized from the community. The just thing is, we've seen more women enter different institutions. We've seen those more female dominant modes of being come into play, certainly in universities with the cancel culture. Those seem to be, that seems to be a more of a feminine way of dealing with these issues. And I just think, look, our institutions work really well when they, have a strong, background on merit and on meritocracy. And certainly there's a role for community, but, we have to recognize that there's real differences between men and women. We have to appreciate those differences. There's different realms and different spaces, and it's not done in a way where, people are put in advance into some roles, but it's also to allow people to express themselves. I mean, there's this gigantic lie that somehow we're all the same in some, physical way, either the genders or in any other way. And, that's part of what the left has done, is it's sort of looked at all forms of difference or inequality as a consequence of oppression or a victimization. And really, there's just differences, and it's healthy to have those differences. I mean, I'm so struck by how bad the culture is right now. It's so boring. Like, the movies are boring. The music's not great. It's not taking risks. And so what we see is this weird inversion where you see, I want civilization to be sort of, boring and reliable and structured, and you want culture to be exciting and innovative and transgressive. But instead, we've got this transgressive civilization and this boring culture. Let's get back to where it was. Let's let Hollywood be creative again, but that means they should be able to take risks and be politically incorrect. Meanwhile, let's just get back to the fire department doing what the fire department's supposed to do.
I think that's a great summary of the state of affairs. I do think that on the bright side of things, you mentioned like this was the podcast election, which is like the reemergence of essentially Lincoln Douglas style discourse, right? Just like, we're running against each other. Let's get in front of a crowd for 3 hours and debate without notes.
Right.
Are you an optimist or a pessimist right now? I get I get the feeling that you're an optimist, but so if the answer is you're an optimist, like, what makes you optimistic?
I mean, I think the election gave me some optimism. I'll be perfectly honest. I'm not a partisan. I was a neutral in the election, but I did feel a strong sense of catharsis that the country had rejected this really, frankly, totalitarian wokeism that we were suffering under. This latest thing with Mark Zuckerberg reaffirming free speech. I'm here at the University of Austin, and the first of all, it's succeeding so well. Like everything's running well, which you would not expect
Yeah.
after just a half a year. So now the pressure, even a very nice treatment by 60 Minutes, which you would expect to be nasty, and they were very nice. And so now really the problem is the other way, which is that the desire from the board of trustees of the University of Austin is for us to get bigger, so the question faster. And so the question is, can we keep that beautiful small culture not grow too fast? Don't want to ruin this by scaling up, but we do feel the pressure to be in service of the civilization, to be a sort of, a light upon which, to shine upon the civilization that we want to rebuild. So, yeah, I mean, I just think this is a very special country. We were built different, and we have to use kind of geeky language, it's a great platform they created with this constitution and with this free speech, but it ultimately depends on the people and on the culture. And I think that, we kind of went to some really freaky extremes, and some of it was driven by social media. Some of it was driven by the changes in the global economy, some of it by the changes within the Republican Party. But it feels like we're arriving at a place where we could see some really salutary reform and renovation. And for me, that gives me newfound hope in the American dream.
If you like this clip, you should check out the full video and all the other great content we've got at Dad Saves America. So be sure to hit the like button, subscribe, and ring that bell so you won't miss our new stuff as it drops each week.